Now, human rights campaigners have claimed officers from Russia's intelligence service went to the prison where Alexei Navalny was held just 2 days before his death.
The 47-year-old, most high-profile Putin critic died suddenly on Friday. In the days following, Navalny's mother has been unable to recover his body.
Well, hundreds of people across Russia have been detained and blocked from laying flowers at memorial events.
Joining us now is former advisor to the Clinton and Bush administrations, Steve Gill. A very good morning to you. Thanks for talking to us. What do you think the West's options are in terms of taking action against Putin? We keep hearing about more sanctions, but what difference are more sanctions really going to make here?
Well, it's certainly unfortunate for Mr. Navalny and his family that this death occurred, but it's also unfortunate, I think, for Putin and perhaps for the world if there was going to be a path to peace at this particular time in the Ukraine conflict. It actually doesn't make any sense that Putin would have directly caused the death of Navalny. I mean, after all, he was in a Siberian prison. He was off the political stage. He was probably less relevant than he has been in years. This certainly brings him back to the forefront and raises the speculation of what happened and why. So I think the timing, certainly for Putin, is bad. It's also ironic that it comes when America and the UK and others are desperate to get more funding for Ukraine, and this certainly may bolster the argument that Ukraine needs the additional $60 billion they're seeking from the U.S. So I think the timing is interesting, and it's hard to really ascribe that Putin at this particular time would have caused this to happen.
Oh, Steve, you're going against just about every other commentator and Russia expert on this one, who say that one of the key messages here is that Putin isn't bothered about what the international community thinks about all of this and those timings or anything else. What he wants to do is send a message to those upstarts in Russia: don't mess with me.
Well, and that may be true, but certainly keeping this guy in a Siberian prison for the rest of his life was accomplishing that mission pretty effectively. Giving more impetus to another $60 billion in weapons going to Ukraine with this argument certainly doesn't help Putin's cause. And I just don't think he's stupid. He's a guy that's making decisions, and this may have just been unfortunate timing. It does, I think, give new cause, new momentum for those to argue that Ukraine needs another $60 billion and may make it easier for the U.S. To do that. In terms of more sanctions or more reprisals against Putin and Russia, I think, as President Biden said the other day, that they've done a lot, and hundreds of thousands of Russian soldiers and others have paid the price with their lives. It's hard to see that a response on this will actually do more to stop Putin if, in fact, this was an intentional murder of this guy.
And what about the risk to other critics of Putin? They might not be as high profile as Navalny, but they still have something to say. Are they now in more danger, do you think?
I would think so. And again, they certainly have to be concerned that they could be put at more danger if, in fact, again, just putting the guy in prison for the rest of his life in one of the gulags that is not the most hospitable prison in the world, I think is sending a bit of a message. But certainly if you're a vocal critic in Russia today, you've got to be looking over your shoulder and be a little bit worried more today than you perhaps were the other day. It is so somewhat ironic that here in the West, there's consternation over Putin jailing this critic when you have Joe Biden and the Democrats in the U.S. trying to jail their top political opponent for the rest of his life. And you saw in Ukraine, one of the journalists who was a critic of Zelensky, he gets put in prison and dies. So a lot of folks around the world, in the U.S., in Ukraine, and certainly in Russia, don't have clean hands in the way that they operate themselves in this kind of context.
Well, have we heard anything from Trump on this?
I haven't seen anything directly, which is a bit, interesting. I think I would have, come out and pointed out that while it is tragic that Mr. Navalny has passed, the Democrats are wanting to do the same thing to him that Putin did to Navalny, and maybe we not a double standard. Quit trying to put your political opponents in prison, whether they're in Russia or whether they're in the United States.
Of course, a lot of people would argue there is actually a case against Donald Trump, though. That would be the key difference.
It would be a good time to wait until see what happens, not just with the trials, but also the appellate process, as we're certainly seeing the one in Atlanta fall apart with the DA and her top prosecutor having intimate relations not of a physical nature, but going to Washington, D.C., getting direction from the Biden administration in prosecuting a state case with the assistance of the Biden Department of Justice.
OK. Steve Gill, good to see you as always. Thanks very much indeed.